James Cameron's long-awaited Avatar sequel has finally arrived. Avatar: The Way of Water is certainly expected to have wonderful visuals, and it also needs to make a crap ton of money. But is the story compelling enough to make this a box office success? Once a new threat arrives on Pandora, Jake must work with Neytiri and the army of the Na'vi race to protect their home. Alright, so let's get the gushing over the visuals just right out of the way. I could probably spend the entire time talking about how wonderful they actually look, but I am going to try and temper myself just a bit. Now, when the first Avatar came out, James Cameron broke the old model for 3D and showed the world what phenomenal depth could create and how it could engage audiences with the movie in ways just the standard presentation never had before. Now, we all know those graphics, they were crazy good, regardless of what you thought of the story or even the movie as a whole. And I was a bit skeptical that Cameron could once again make a spectacle that wowed me. Was he going to be able to improve on what he'd already accomplished? How, right? Well, somehow, the man has done it. The graphics are sensational, again capturing immense depth with the visuals so that the screen feels like it reaches way past what's actually there. There are moments where a rope will be shown as it's pulled tightly, and the quick view down the rope, it was just incredible. It's stunningly real, which was odd to see because my brain was trying to reconcile how it knew what I was seeing was a movie, but in that instant, it felt like a window opened up and the rope was just right there in front of me. Now, some other scenes feature bullets flying through the air, and it's almost too difficult to describe how impressive this was to watch. The bullets come flying towards the screen, but not in that cheesy old school 3D way where it's a gimmick to have junk pop out of the screen. This was way more visceral, which then made the whole scene even more engaging. We still get some awesome aerials like we did in the first, where characters ride on those pterodactyl things, and we see airships flying over the terrain. Those are still great to watch, and they re-engaged me with Pandora, which really helped to just set the scene, especially if it had been a while, maybe since you last saw the original film. Cameron's masterful at doing water scenes. Now, he's done Titanic, obviously, and while that really wasn't a water movie other than the fact that the whole boat is on the water, he did create all that technology that allowed him to film the actual Titanic at the bottom of the ocean. And then, don't forget about The Abyss, which is outstanding as well. But here, because water is literally a main focus of the story, there's a great deal that takes place in the ocean. And whew, a lot of this is breathtaking. I'm pretty sure that Cameron also filmed a lot of the actors underwater to give it an extra realism, and that really does shine through in the final product. The movements are fluid, and they help to put us in the water along with the characters. Now, I really love the variety of sea life that we see it too. Just as well as the plant life and even rock formations that are present. It's inviting as well as treacherous, and it all helps to support the idea of connectedness and cyclical existence that's reinforced throughout the story. Now, one thing that I'm still not totally sure how I feel about is the use of a high frame rate for the majority of the final product. Now, typically, movies are shot at 24 frames a second, which then gives them this natural-looking slight blur to movements. And the faster the frame rate, the less blur, leading to very crisp-looking visuals that do feel slightly unnatural. Now, not every single scene is a high frame rate, which was a bit confusing for my eyes. There are small segments where it just looks like it's 24 frames, and then that causes a jarring effect when the scene shifts back and forth between those high frame rates and the lower frame rate. Now, this didn't ruin my experience, but it did take some getting used to, and even by the end, I don't think I'd fully become accustomed to that switching. The actors do a great job at emoting and creating expressions that convey everything from just intense joy to incredible sadness. And that's especially important since these are motion captured performances. Now, for as much as Sam Worthington and Zoe Saldana were in the first movie and then its main focus, here the kids take a more prominent role in the narrative. And that's kind of fun to have this begin to pass the mantle to the next generation and allow the story to grow and not just focus on the original duo. They're still very present within the story, even if they aren't on camera as much as the kids are. As I'm sure you're probably aware, this is on the longer side at 3 hours and 12 minutes, so it might challenge your bladder. Now, if you do feel like you need to rush out for a quick break, there are a few times that lend themselves to this. Now, several times when Jake and his family, they arrive at the ocean location, there are just wonderful underwater sequences that really showcase the beauty of the sea. The characters swim and explore, and while moments in this can provide some info and context, there are also spots that are a bit visually self-indulgent. So if you see characters swimming around, that's typically a great spot for a pee break. Now, the story in this, just like in the first movie, it's a fairly simple one. A threat has arrived once again on Pandora, and Jake Sully finds himself the target. So, in an effort to save not only the Na'vi people, but his family too, Jake takes his family to the ocean where he believes they're going to be safe. Now, of course, there's going to be complications, and at some point, trouble will arise, which then leads to an exciting climax. And woven throughout this story, though, is a focus on family. And I really appreciate how layered it is and how many different ways the story approaches the idea of family, especially fitting in and feeling as if you were of value and belong. And I think sometimes these were approached in very obvious ways, lacking some nuance or subtlety, but even so, they're effective at creating captivating and touching arcs that have some emotional pull to them. I do think some of the stories could have been even more engaging had we received more development on the characters, but I think some of that was also saved so that it can be addressed in the third installment. And there are arcs that are really just beginning, having only the surface scratched on the information that we're given. Now, some of the items are intriguing and even a bit mysterious, and that really does have me looking forward to Avatar 3. And while there are dramatic sequences and then slower, visually fascinating scenes, there are also a lot of action pieces that work to create some huge tension. Even though some of the characters lacked background and development, there are a few that we are given enough to care about them, which then leads to some intense interactions. And in a few of these, there is real peril that's felt, causing anxiety and stress that's then amplified by situational urgency. And similar to Avengers Endgame, the last battle and the end climax, it lasts probably about an hour, making it a very exciting finale. Now, there are some moments that are supposed to be more emotionally investing than they hit me, but I was still very concerned for several of the characters during that last half of the movie. So at the end of this, I had a huge smile on my face because the whole thing is just a visual feast. The action's exciting and appropriately violent, but it's also balanced with softer and more dramatic sequences that allow the story to breathe when it needs to. And yeah, the story is fairly straightforward and it's a simple one, but there's enough present to keep it engaging and worth the time investment. Also, I'm not sure if it's even playing in 2D, but if you have the choice, go with the upgrade and see it in 3D as it's intended. I mean, this one is definitely worth it. So overall, Avatar: The Way of Water manages to improve on the visuals its predecessor established to deliver a spectacular ocean-themed view of Pandora. The central theme of family is rich for storytelling, and while not all of the character arcs are developed fully, the story is captivating and touching. It may take some getting used to, but the high frame rate that most of this is presented in does help to create crisp visuals that are enhanced by the amazing 3D. James Cameron delivers on the spectacle we expect and gives us an engaging story to boot. And this is even worth the kidney damage and possible bladder infection that I got because I didn't want to miss a single second of the visual treasure. There's no sex, some brief nudity, a lot of profanity, and then a ton of violence. I give Avatar: The Way of Water 4 out of 5 couches. So, do you have a favorite James Cameron movie? Let me know what it is in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.